Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Belarus is once again at the center of a political storm, and this time the tension feels heavier than before. The country has lived under tight control for decades, but recent events suggest cracks that are hard to ignore. Reports of soldiers refusing or questioning orders have sparked global attention, raising urgent questions about loyalty, power, and the future of the state. For years, President Alexander Lukashenko has relied on a strong security apparatus to maintain authority. The military, police, and internal forces have been presented as unshakably loyal. That image has been essential to the survival of the regime, because in systems like this, control depends less on popularity and more on obedience. What makes the current crisis different is the narrative of defiance from within the ranks. Even limited acts of hesitation or refusal can have an outsized psychological impact. When soldiers begin to question orders, it signals something deeper than simple disobedience. It suggests uncertainty about legitimacy, responsibility, and consequences. Belarus has faced mass protests before, especially after disputed elections. In those moments, security forces were deployed to suppress demonstrations, and for the most part, they did so. Yet even then, there were quiet signs of discomfort. Some officers resigned, some soldiers reportedly avoided direct confrontation. Those moments now seem like early warnings. The role of the military in Belarus is complex. Officially, it is a professional force tasked with defending the nation. In practice, it has also been used as a tool of internal control. This dual role places soldiers in a moral and political dilemma, especially when orders involve confronting civilians rather than external threats. Recent reports suggest that certain units have shown reluctance to carry out commands aimed at suppressing dissent. In some cases, soldiers are said to have delayed action. In others, they reportedly refused outright. Even if these incidents are isolated, they matter because they break the myth of total loyalty. Defiance does not always look dramatic. It can be quiet and procedural, a delay here, a request for clarification there. A failure to act with expected force. In authoritarian systems, even small deviations can signal deeper fractures. Leaders understand this, which is why they often react harshly to even minor insubordination. The reasons behind such defiance are not difficult to imagine. Many soldiers are young conscripts. They come from ordinary families. They live in the same cities and towns as the protesters. When ordered to act against people who look like their neighbors, friends, or relatives, the emotional burden becomes intense. Economic pressure also plays a role. Belarus has faced sanctions, inflation, and declining living standards. Soldiers are not immune to these realities. When pay loses value and living conditions worsen, loyalty based on stability begins to erode. Material hardship can turn obedience into resentment. Another factor is information. In the past, state media tightly controlled narratives. Today, despite restrictions, information flows through messaging apps, foreign media, and personal networks. Soldiers are not cut off from these channels. They see alternative versions of events. They hear stories that contradict official statements. This exposure can create cognitive dissonance. When orders are justified by claims that do not match what soldiers observe, trust weakens. A soldier who doubts the truthfulness of leadership is more likely to question the morality of commands. That doubt can be enough to slow or stop action. Lukashenko's leadership style has long been based on projecting strength. He presents himself as the guarantor of order, stability, and national survival. Any sign of military defiance directly challenges this image. It suggests that control is not as absolute as portrayed. Historically, moments when security forces hesitate often mark turning points. In many countries, regimes have survived protests as long as the military remained unified and obedient. When that unity fractures, even slightly, outcomes become unpredictable. Belarus may be approaching such a moment. The government's response to reported defiance has been cautious and firm at the same time. Officials deny widespread disobedience and emphasize loyalty. At the same time, there are signs of increased monitoring, reshuffling of commanders, and stricter enforcement of discipline. Such measures reveal anxiety. Leaders who feel secure do not need constant reassurance. Efforts to publicly reaffirm loyalty often indicate fear of losing it. The more the state insists on unity, the more observers wonder why that insistence is necessary. International reactions add another layer. Foreign governments and organizations are watching closely. Any confirmation of military refusal could shift diplomatic calculations. Some may see an opening for pressure. Others may fear instability spreading beyond Belarus's borders. Russia's role cannot be ignored. Belarus is closely tied to Moscow politically, economically, and militarily. Lukashenko has relied on Russian support in past crises, however, reliance creates dependency. If Belarusian forces appear unreliable, questions arise about how far Russia would go to ensure stability. For Belarusian soldiers, the presence of external actors complicates decisions. Defying orders at home is one thing, the possibility of foreign intervention changes the stakes entirely. Loyalty then becomes entangled with national sovereignty and fear of external control. Within Belarusian society, reports of soldier defiance have had a powerful symbolic effect. For protesters and critics of the regime, they offer hope. The idea that the military might not act as a unified tool of repression changes the emotional landscape of resistance. Hope, however, is fragile. Isolated acts of defiance do not guarantee systemic change. Regimes can adapt, they can purge disloyal elements, reward loyal ones, and restructure forces. The outcome depends on whether defiance spreads or remains contained. The psychology of soldiers is crucial here. If individuals believe they are alone in their doubts, they are more likely to comply. If they believe others share their hesitation, collective resistance becomes possible. Communication, even informal, can tip this balance. Lukashenko understands this dynamic. Preventing coordination among discontented soldiers is a priority. This explains strict controls on communication within the forces and severe penalties for speaking out. Fear remains a powerful tool, yet fear has limits. When fear outweighs belief in legitimacy, obedience becomes mechanical and brittle. A system held together only by fear can crack under pressure. The question is whether Belarus has reached that point. The crisis also raises ethical questions. Soldiers swear oaths to defend their country. When orders are perceived as serving a regime rather than the nation, that oath becomes ambiguous. Each soldier must interpret where duty ends and conscience begins. Some argue that military neutrality in political conflicts is essential. Others say neutrality is impossible when the state itself is contested. In Belarus, soldiers are being forced into this debate not in theory, but in practice. The long-term consequences of defiance are uncertain. If the regime survives, those who resist it may face punishment. If it falls or reforms, those same individuals may be remembered as catalysts for change. This uncertainty weighs heavily on personal decisions. From Lukashenko's perspective, maintaining control requires decisive action. Showing weakness could encourage further defiance. At the same time, excessive repression risks accelerating dissent. This is the classic dilemma of authoritarian rule during crisis. Belarus stands at a crossroads shaped by loyalty, fear, and fatigue. Soldiers defying orders, even quietly, reflect broader societal exhaustion. Decades of centralized power have produced stability for some, stagnation for others, and frustration for many. The international community often looks for clear signs of collapse or revolution. Reality is usually slower and messier. Crises unfold in stages, marked by small but meaningful shifts. Soldier defiance may be one such shift. It is important to avoid exaggeration. Belarus is not necessarily on the brink of immediate change. Institutions remain intact. Leadership remains in place, yet the narrative of unquestioned obedience has been damaged, and that damage matters. Every crisis reshapes relationships between state and society. Even if order is restored, memories of hesitation will linger. Trust, once broken, is difficult to fully repair. The regime may emerge more rigid, more suspicious, and more isolated. For soldiers, the experience may leave lasting scars. Being placed in opposition to civilians or forced to choose between orders and conscience can alter how individuals view authority forever. These internal changes often outlast political events. The Belarus crisis is therefore not just about defying orders, it is about the slow erosion of certainty. Certainty that power is absolute, certainty that loyalty is guaranteed, certainty that fear is enough. As events continue to unfold, the world will watch for patterns rather than isolated incidents. Does hesitation spread to more units? Do resignations increase? Do orders change in tone or scope? These details will reveal more than official statements. For now, Belarus remains in a tense equilibrium. The state projects strength, society tests limits, soldiers stand in between. Their choices, whether visible or hidden, may ultimately shape the country's path. This moment reminds us that even in tightly controlled systems, human agency persists. Orders are given, but they are carried out by people with thoughts, emotions, and doubts. When those doubts surface, history often begins to move. The crisis in Belarus is still unfolding. It may resolve through repression, negotiation, or transformation. What is clear is that the image of unbreakable loyalty has been challenged, and once challenged, it can never be fully restored. In the end, the story of soldiers defying orders is not only about power struggles at the top, it is about ordinary individuals confronting extraordinary pressure. Their responses, quiet or loud, may determine whether Belarus remains frozen in its past or steps into an uncertain future. As observers, we must look beyond headlines and consider the deeper forces at play: fear and loyalty, stability and change, authority and conscience. Belarus is now a living example of how these forces collide. The coming months will show whether this defiance was a brief tremor or the beginning of something larger. Either way, it has already altered the conversation, and once a conversation changes, so does the possibility of what comes next.